Hi folks, Chris DeLeon here at HomeTeamGameDev.com, and today's video back in rotation, a little more normal after the flight sim passenger one, which I think was hopefully a nice break from the more serious stuff. But this one's going to be more about the self-command material. That's self-command.com, the productivity audiobook, and this is a tip that's not from there, but like a lot of these videos, complements it well, or might be part of material I'm working on for a possible follow-up in the future. And this is a simple point that is, I think, opens up a lot of doors for you once you get used to it, once you recognize the importance of it. It's a key skill that sometimes gets overlooked because in school it's not necessary. When we're working for someone else, it's not necessary. Anytime we're working for ourselves, it's essential. And that might mean if you're running your own business and your own boss, like I've had to do for 7-10 years, whatever it's been. It might be the case if you need to just do a side project. If you're trying to make your own podcast, if you're working on your own audiobooks, if you're working on your own ebooks, if you're working on a blog, building your own stuff of any kind, building games on the side, lots of things I help people with fall in these categories of essentially side projects where you have to learn to self-manage. And the thing I want to focus on today is just a singular point. I'm not even going to give you the prescription for exactly how you have to do it, but you need some sort of system that works for you in which you can identify that there is a thing that is worth doing, but should not happen right now, in a way that will not get lost and will not derail you right now. And this comes up all the time in game programming, game development, where we're working on a feature, and maybe I'm talking to someone through office hours, and they spot, ooh, here's a part that should be fixed. We should change this. I almost even forgot there was this problem over here. I've been ignoring it for so long. Or, you know, there's a part that I know is not quite written the way it should be in the code. Don't derail on that. You've still got the main thing you're focused on. Just because you've identified the task worth doing does not mean it's the task worth doing right now. That's where, so in Home Team, we throw it on our project Trello, which is basically we're using it as a schedule. In my projects, if it's a solo thing, I often use my Workflowy these days instead of a Trello, just how I find it works better for the way my brain kind of functions around these things. Or sometimes also my Google Calendar. And that's actually also a really powerful way to do it because, of course, Google Calendar, easy to use mobile, on computer, etc., in a way that I've given it a time, a date for when I'm next going to have this come back up. And that's an important part of this because, again, there's two sides to this. One is to not let ourselves derail on this thing that came up, but it's equally so to not lose the task either because it does need to be done. It is important. And so there's been a multi-month big effort I've been working on as part of some Home Team improvements as kind of a pre-membership plan and system. We'll hear more about that in the future. But as part of that, I'm continuously doing these big old chunks of work, along the way identifying, spotting dozens of little possible side trails, just little things that need a tweak. Any given one of which doesn't take very long, wouldn't be that big of a deal, but I know that there be dragons. I know that the moment I start digging on any one of those, it takes more time than's expected. It leads to finding more tasks that are hidden that also could be tweaked and polished. And so first I got to get pushed through, and you've heard this word before for game design purposes, a first pass of get the high level, get the priorities, get the most important things sorted out first. So you got the whole thing kind of structured together. Then when you zoom out from your bird's eye view, it's much easier to look down on that and reprioritize out of the things that I identified were worth doing, although those are not equally worth doing. And that allows us to then rebuild out of the stuff that we've been sort of setting aside for, we'll get to these. And I see the same thing happen when I've got a few youth clients I work with. For the most part, I work with adults, college age or graduated later in life. But a few youth clients I work with, 10-year-old, 11-year-old, same kind of situation they're in, where they have an active imagination. They're working on a project. Ooh, here's an idea. I want to do this. This seems like a cool thing to do. Part of the discipline that goes into learning how to program games and develop games is to say, that is a good idea. We should do that, but we're in the middle of doing this other thing. And if we try to shift gears right now, we're not going to finish the current thing. And if we don't develop the habits and the discipline to be able to finish the current thing we're working on, then we can't even enter that other task with confidence we'll finish it either before we get derailed from it. And this is the same breakdown, although it's so much more obvious to see sometimes in children, just because they can be so much more bubbly, they can have so much more energy than maybe some of the rest of us do at different phases of our life, depending on what we're going through, what's going on. The same thing absolutely depth charges tons of adults in their side projects. And the reason why these things don't happen to us as bad in the workplace, the reason why we don't have to build this habit, in most cases in school, and there's exceptions. Grad school does a little bit better job of giving you enough, I don't like the expression, giving enough leeway to get yourself in trouble, is because typically someone else is breaking down the tasks for us. They're prioritizing it for us. We never lose focus in those cases because somebody else has decided for us the measurement. And they're saying, well, this is the part that's graded. So if you're off on a rabbit trail, you know you're wasting your time. Or they'll say, well, this is what you're getting paid for. So if you're doing this other stuff, help yourself, but you're getting paid based on if you do this or not. And we lack that clarity when we're doing the work for ourselves, when we're having to be our own manager, our own teacher, our own parent, our own coach. When we are the ones structuring the same person's doing the work, it's also us. That becomes amorphous in a way. We lose that clarity. And part of the value of self-command as a framework, the audiobook and the attached transcript if you prefer to read the ebook, part of that distinction comes from this division between thinking of myself as my manager and thinking of myself as my employee. Figuring out, is this the task to do, and am I doing that task? And part of why we put the thought on the whiteboard right in front of us is precisely this thing to steer us back to it. And I mentioned in there one of the simple things, right, is that if you have a distracting thought, you put it down somewhere. You write it down somewhere, if only to get it off your brain, but also so that if you have a value or reason later to actually go back and do something with it, you didn't lose it either. It's still there. And the thing I want to focus on today is just this last point of putting it somewhere you're actually going to see it. That it doesn't really help if what you do is you squirrel it away in a text file you're never going to look at again. It doesn't really help if you email it to yourself, but if it's get lost in thousands of other unknown messages. It doesn't help if you write it somewhere in a scrap of paper and then lose track of it. You need somewhere to put it that you're going to look at it. Whether you build a habit of looking at your workflowy daily, whether you set up your phone for Google Calendar notifications on it, or whatever it is, something so that when you set aside a task, when it comes back to you, it'll reappear on your radar. You don't lose track of it. You've got a place. And for some people, this could be they have a text file on their desktop. They have a single Google Doc to keep editing forever. If that's what works for you, that's fine. It's making sure you have an answer to this system need for there's a task worth doing, but it's not the task to be doing right here, right now, without losing it either. That's it for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you want more about that, check out the productivity audiobook at self-command.com. Again, this is kind of more of a complementary point. We'll see pretty closely how it integrates into it, including, most importantly, this main point of how to not get derailed from the things that I've decided are the important thing to be doing at any given moment to put me in control, since ultimately you're only doing one thing at a time in some order, whether you're being deliberate about which thing that is in which order or not. See you next time.